Is Pascal Siakam a top 5 player? A top 20 player? Is he a superstar? It feels like this is a topic that requires a deep dive because we've been having this discussion in our comment section for about 2 weeks now, and it feels like people are all over the board. And if you're a Raptor fan versus if you're an NBA fan, you probably come to a very different conclusion when it comes to this topic. If you're a Raptor fan, I get it. American media bias is strong, and the Raptors are always underrated by Vegas, and if there was ever a player in NBA history who was going to be underrated by American media, you were going to be talking about a foreign-born superstar who plays for the NBA's sole non-American team. So I understand that if you're a Raptor fan, you're probably saying this is just another case of American media not giving Pascal Siakam his due. And if you're a casual NBA fan who does not really follow the Raptors, you probably think of Pascal Siakam the same way that we thought about Gordon Hayward or Kemba Walker a couple of years ago, right? As a guy who you can sort of win with, but not as the first guy. So let's marry these two opinions and let's look at the numbers. Let's compare him to guys that we traditionally consider to be superstars, and let's just see where he ranks. If you're new around here, my name is Robert. This is Pensari Basketball. Grab your coffee. Let's get to it. So first, let's talk about the Raptors side of this, okay? Because if you're a Raptor fan, you've actually sat through the entire progression of Pascal Siakam, and it has been a beautiful story to witness if you're a Raptor fan, because you see this guy who started late in life, and that's something we can all identify with, right? Picking up something late in life. And he worked so damn hard. We're talking about becoming a first round pick in the NBA, going from the G League to becoming a valuable member of the bench mob, to somehow through hard work every summer ascending to becoming Kawhi's running mate for a championship, winning an NBA championship, only to see Kawhi leave, picking up a max contract, having that entire meltdown in the bubble, having the fan base turn on him, and they're now resurging back to his star status last year, having that huge bounce back year. This is a story that has all the compelling notes of Rocky Balboa. Okay, so if you're a Raptor fan, I completely understand that the only natural end conclusion to this is Pascal Siakam ascends to top 5 player in the NBA, takes his rightful throne, wins an NBA championship as a first option, and the story concludes curtains. If you're an NBA fan, you probably see this a little bit differently. And I have a lot of friends who are NBA fans of other teams. They're analysts for other teams. And they, whenever we talk about Siakam, they seem to talk about him in a very different light. When I'm talking to Raptor fans, I'm hearing, well, what's the big difference between Jayson Tatum and Pascal Siakam? To me, it's 1A, 1B. It's splitting hairs. NBA fans don't see it that way. And if we're looking at preseason rankings of players, Pascal Siakam was ranked anywhere from 24th to 28th to 30th by a lot of publications. So how can a guy who was voted to the All-NBA team, third team last year, which by definition means top 15 player, how can that guy be the 28th to 30th player without there being some sort of funny business going on? First, I want to look into the crafted model, right? So we're going to flash some graphics on the screen. And according to Crafted's model, Pascal Siakam is a 90th percentile offensive player and a 74th percentile defensive player, which again, on the surface looks like he's an incredible two-way player. But I do want to preface that when we're talking about superstars, as in specifically top 5 players, their numbers look really different. So here we're going to see Pascal Siakam. And now let's look at Joel Embiid. Let's look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. Let's look at Nikola Jokic. As you see, 74th percentile and 90th percentile certainly seems like a far cry from 98th and 99th percentile outcomes. But sure, let's just agree for the sake of argument that we are not even remotely going into the territory of arguing whether or not Pascal Siakam is better than those 3 guys. That's never been the argument. Top 5 doesn't mean you're top 3. So let's talk about guys like Jayson Tatum, Bam Adebayo. What about Jarrett Allen? Now when you start to look at these numbers, now we are firmly talking about top 35, top 20, top 15, top 10 guys. We're not talking about top 3 guys. And certainly we can see that the analytics do paint a picture that those guys are slightly better or comparable to Pascal Siakam. But when we start talking about consistently top 5 guys like Luka Doncic, like Kevin Durant, we do see that those numbers tend to paint Siakam as being a little bit inferior. Let's talk about win shares per 48, because I think that win shares per 48 is something that sort of cuts out a lot of the advantages that Siakam would have had as being a minutes leader for the Raptors last year. Now, for those of you who don't know, Pascal Siakam, just due to how Nick Nurse structured his lineups, was not only one of the higher usage players in the NBA last year, which means he was given a copious number of opportunities with the ball and given a huge opportunity to just rack up numbers in the system, but he also had more minutes to do it. And so I do think that when we start pointing to, well, he's the only player in the NBA that averaged this many points, this many rebounds, this many assists, first of all, that's a function of play style, but it's also a function of minutes. Obviously, if you play more minutes, you're going to grab more rebounds. So I do think that we need to stop talking about counting stats and let's just look at the per minute stats, especially when we're talking about players who kind of played comparable minutes, 35 to 37, 38 minutes a night. What about win shares per 48? The top 3 guys in win shares per 48 will not surprise you. Jokic, Giannis, Gobert, right? These are analytics darlings. Then we have Rob Williams and Joel Embiid, right? What these players have in common is they're all extremely good rebounders and they're big guys, right? And if you're looking at the analytics support throughout the NBA, you're generally seeing guys who are about 6'7" to 6'11", which is exactly where Pascal Siakam is. You're looking at guys who have the ball a lot. In the case of Jokic, Giannis, these are high usage players. They rebound the ball a lot. They have a lot of creation opportunities. So in a way, Pascal Siakam is playing a similar role as the top guys in the NBA are playing for their teams, except Pascal Siakam is playing it for the Raptors. So where does Pascal Siakam rank in win shares per 48? Does he rank top 10, top 20? He ranks 41st. What about PER? Now, PER is a very flawed stat, but I do think that sometimes it can just show in terms of how productive a player is on the court, because PER overemphasizes rebounds and definitely overemphasizes efficiency because it is an efficiency stat, but it is a one metric stat. So who are the top 5 guys? Well, no surprises. It's Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, LeBron James, Kevin Durant. Where's Pascal Siakam? He's 31st. What about box plus minus? Getting a little bit more advanced here. We have Jokic, Giannis, Embiid, Luka, LeBron. And where's Pascal Siakam? Is he top 20? No, he's 27th. What about offensive box plus minus? Jokic, Giannis, Embiid, Trae Young, LeBron James. Where's Siakam? Is he top 20? Nope. Top 30? Nope. He's 31st. What about defensive box plus minus? Because this is something that a lot of people really do point to with Siakam. They say, well, Trae Young and Ja Morant, these guys are great offensive players, but Pascal Siakam, he's got the two-way impact, right? Well, what about defensive box plus minus? Jokic, Giannis, Matisse Thybulle, Rob Williams, Al Horford. Those are your top 5 guys. Where's Pascal Siakam? He's 35th. What about another one metric stat that seems to get a lot of attention for MVP rankings? Well, value of a replacement. Typically speaking, if you go back through the history of the NBA, value of a replacement has been a very useful predictor for MVP. So what about the top 5 guys in terms of value of a replacement? We have Jokic, Giannis, Embiid, Luka, LeBron. And where's Pascal Siakam? 17th. So there is not really anything that you can point to that says Pascal Siakam is a top 15 player in the NBA. Now I want to say that these are all last year stats. This is a year in which Kawhi Leonard did not play. Okay, and I think when healthy, it'd be very difficult for anyone to say with a straight face that Pascal Siakam is better than Kawhi Leonard. Zion Williamson did not play last year. And when healthy, okay, that's a player who has been definitively better than what Pascal Siakam is. Now, also, I think it's worth noting that a lot of the players that I'm mentioning here are younger than Pascal Siakam, be it Luka Doncic, be it Jayson Tatum, be it Devin Booker, a lot of guys who are ahead of him in these rankings that are actually his age or much younger than him. So where does the ascent of someone like, I don't know, Jayson Tatum, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, these guys are all younger than Siakam. So where does a guy who's 25 go from 25 to 26 versus a guy who's 28 go from 28 to 29? I feel like if at the age of 28 you are consistently below top 25 in most advanced metrics, the pathway to becoming a top 5 player in the NBA is almost impossible. So what about playoff stats, right? Because look, a lot of people will say, hey, I don't really care what you're doing in the regular season, but the playoffs is where it counts. Well, I think the playoffs are where Siakam has been exposed the most. And I just want to point to something that I think is very relevant, because it seems like there are a lot of NBA players that get a lot of slack for not being able to shoot threes, right? Giannis, Ben Simmons, there's a lot of theories out there that you can't successfully build a playoff offense around a first option that can't shoot, which is why we see Ben Simmons being clowned on for not being able to shoot threes. This is why we see guys like Russell Westbrook being clowned on for not being able to shoot threes. This is like the whole argument that despite these guys being such incredible players, because they can't shoot, and even Giannis, after he got stomped by the Toronto Raptors and he got clamped by Kawhi Leonard, that was the whole narrative. You can't win a championship with Giannis Antetokounmpo because he can't shoot threes. Well, look at Pascal Siakam's 3-point percentage in his last 6 playoff series. Just look at the numbers. I think what we're seeing is not what we saw with Donovan Mitchell, right? There's an example of a player who has consistently elevated his game in the playoffs. In the case of Siakam, be it over the last 6-7 playoff series, we have not necessarily seen a guy who has taken the next step in the playoffs. In fact, we have consistently seen his playoff 3-point shooting percentage be such a crippling factor for the rest of the team around him, and also for his own play. Now, I want to show a comparison between a player that, and I mean, look, Basketball Reference has a very flawed metric which uses win shares to compare players, and it says, well, similarity scores. And Pascal Siakam's similarity scores are pretty depressing. But I do want to compare Pascal Siakam to a player that I'm not going to tell you who it is, and I just want to compare the numbers, and I want to put the numbers on the page, and I just want you to look at them, and I want you to just really evaluate. Take a minute to just look at these numbers. These are both numbers of two bigs that are relatively 6'7", 6'9". In their prime, they played a pretty functional role within their offenses. They were both guys who had good ball skills. They were both guys who thrived in transition. They're guys who excelled as rebounders, as shooters. They were skilled, big guys. They were both all-stars. Just look at these two sets of numbers and tell me, are they close? Are they close? Okay. Now, who do you think I'm talking about? The player in question is none other than David Lee, a player that no one has ever talked about as a top 20 or top 25 player in the NBA, but at one point was a multiple-time All-Star and a highly productive player. Now, I am not saying to you necessarily that I think that Pascal Siakam and David Lee are comparable players. I am, however, telling you that the statistics do point to him being a lot closer to David Lee than Jayson Tatum, okay? I think that there is a very big gap, personally. I'm just telling you analytically that there is a very big gap between Pascal Siakam and Jayson Tatum. And it's not just because Jayson Tatum is way younger and better and more productive at a much earlier age. Now, a lot of fans of Pascal Siakam will say, well, Jayson Tatum's been playing basketball longer than him. And I do want to say that at some point, this has to stop. We have to stop talking about somebody picking up basketball late, because there are a lot of advantages, I believe, to picking up basketball a little bit later. There's a lot of guys who picked up basketball at the age of 4, 5, 6 years old that have screwed up shooting mechanics and screwed up ideas about basketball that they have just their muscle memory has been wrong. Pascal Siakam has been given a lot of advantages as well. People will always talk about the trials and tribulations. They'll talk about the racism of the fans and everything that happened in the bubble and how he had to overcome that. But what people don't realize, and maybe what people don't like to talk about, is the fact that Pascal Siakam ended up in a situation that is the dream situation for most NBA prospects. To end up on the Toronto Raptors with Nick Nurse, with Dwayne Casey, with Masai Ujiri, the ultimate stability, the ultimate system for development. We have seen time and time again the same system that people are saying, well, Scottie ended up in the perfect system with the Toronto Raptors, and that's why he's got advantages over Cade and Franz Wagner and Jalen Green. Well, guess what? Pascal Siakam came up in the exact same system. Okay, OG Anunoby, same system. This is the best possible situation for a basketball prospect to end up in. And yes, the fact that he picked up basketball a little bit late should factor in up until the age of about 23, 24, but it doesn't keep having this impact. It's not like a guy who picked up basketball at 17 is going to have upside at 32 that's equivalent to a guy who's 25 years old. It's just not how it works, okay? Pretty much at this point, it is what it is, okay? You can get marginally better. We've seen players like DeMar DeRozan, who are notorious hard workers, take steps in their game, add little bits and pieces to their game. But if you are talking about a guy going from a top 25-ish player, which is exactly where I think Pascal Siakam is at this point in his career, 22 to 25 is where I see him. If you're talking about that guy taking a step to a top 5 player, then you are talking about the most unprecedented, possibly one of the most rare, absolutely the rarest development story in NBA history. And if you're banking on that, then I would say don't hold your breath. Anyways, this has been a nice little rant on Pascal Siakam. I hope that these numbers do provide some context to what I've been talking about the last few weeks. This is not a Pascal Siakam hate video. I, for one, hope that he ascends to top 15, top 20, consistently top 20 NBA status. I think for him to take that next step, I do believe he's going to have to get a little bit stronger. I think he's going to have to take a major step forward as a shooter, because I do think that his shooting has a tremendous impact on the players around him, and the fact that he can't really space means that he has to be more of an on-ball guy. And I just think that this team would be a lot better if Pascal Siakam could provide a little bit more gravity off the ball. So I, for one, am very much rooting for Pascal Siakam. I am not a Siakam hater. I am not a Fred VanVleet hater. I am a Raptor fan, and I am rooting for every player on this team to thrive. I do, however, take some issue when it seems like the narrative around how good a player is seems to make a fan base completely delusional about how good that player is relative to other players. And I really think that if you want to be taken seriously in NBA circles and talking to NBA fans, that you should stay away from conversations like Pascal Siakam and Jayson Tatum are similar players. They are not. They are not similar at all. They do not have a similar impact, and I guarantee you if you were to swap one for the other, that the Celtics would say no, the Raptors would definitely say yes, and I guarantee the Raptors would be way better with Jayson Tatum than they would be with Pascal Siakam. Not only he's a better defender, he's a better offensive player, he's better at everything. He's a better shooter. He's just literally better across the board. There's literally nothing that Pascal Siakam does better than Jayson Tatum. And to me, it's not even a conversation. So if Pascal Siakam can develop and he can continue to develop, I know that his development curve did have a little bit of a snag there. If he can continue to develop to the point where, he can enter the conversation as a top 10 player, I think that would be an incredible outcome. And I think Raptor fans should be very happy with that. I do, however, think that with the return of guys like Zion Williamson, with the continued evolution of guys like Brandon Ingram, with other young players in the NBA, with the sheer talent burst that is coming into the NBA from guys like Scottie Barnes, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, that I think that you would be very hard-pressed to see Pascal Siakam enter the conversation as a top 20 player in the NBA, in general NBA circles. Anyways, my name is Robert. This has been Pensari Basketball. Please, if you like what you saw here, if you don't like what you saw, let me know in the comments below. Do you think I'm being too low? Is there a statistic out there that you think definitely does point to Pascal Siakam being a top 10, top 15 player in the NBA? I'm really not even talking about top 5. We're just talking about top 10 because I think top 5 is a pretty ridiculous discussion. But Do you see that type of pathway? What do you think he has to improve to get there? Let me know in the comments below. We are almost at 3,000 subscribers. Let's get there before opening night. I think preseason ended with a bang. Obviously, I'm a huge OG Anunoby and Scottie Barnes fan, as you can probably tell from the channel art, and I was really excited to see what those two did. Really happy to see Justin Champagnie make the roster, as if it was any doubt at all. Go back and watch the previous few videos. I was unwavering in my support for this guy. I think he's awesome. And look, I'm really looking forward to this year. I think the Raptors are sneaky contenders. I think they'll win over 50 games. And let's see, you know, I don't see the pathway to top 5, top 10 player, but who knows? I've been proven wrong by Siakam over and over. And if you can prove me wrong again, all the better for the Raptors. See you next time. Have a good one. Peace.